I've been asked several times, is socialism compatible with the U.S. Constitution? So I thought it was time to ponder this, you and I together, right here on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Well, hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study. This is where we read and study the Constitution and teach the rising generation to be free. This is where we come to understand what our rights are, how to defend and assert them, how to know when they're violated. I'm glad you could join me. As always, head to the website, constitutionstudy.com. Find out everything I'm doing here on the Constitution Study. Join in, ask questions, invite me to speak to one of your groups, share these messages. It's all about, again, helping people to understand they can read the Constitution for themselves. It is not that hard to understand. They can know what their rights are. They can be prepared to defend and assert them. And based on that, I want to answer kind of indirectly a question that seems to be brought up every so often, especially with the latest spat of, shall we say, Democratic presidential hopefuls. That is the question, is socialism compatible with the Constitution? Those of you who've been following me for a little while know that I'm really particular about words, about what they mean and how they're used. So before we discuss the question of is socialism compatible with the Constitution, let's make sure we're using the correct definition of socialism. Now, based on what I've found, there's a lot of people that have a lot of different ideas, but socialism is a primary an economic, and I would say bleeds over into a political system where the cost of living is socialized. The idea that everybody in the society shares in everything else that comes from the society. And this is dictated by the government. The government decides how the economy will run and what is done with the output of that economy. Now there are, as it usually frequently happens in human endeavors, a spectrum. There are people that call Denmark socialist, although they don't call themselves socialist. They're simply a high tax, high benefit capitalist system to get to, say, communist China and a communist system where the government actually owns the means of production. But the idea is, is that idea that you can socialize the cost of living and socialize the way we live, and is that compatible with the Constitution? Well, the answer, as frequently happens, isn't quite that simple. It's yes and no. See, individual socialism, the idea that people, individuals and small groups can get together and live a socialist lifestyle, well, that's absolutely compatible with the Constitution as long as it's done voluntarily. Whether it's a commune or a kibbutz, the idea that people can get together and share in their expenses, socialize their costs, socialize their income, you're perfectly free to do that. There's nothing in the Constitution that stops you. And in fact, most of us have lived in this type of environment. They're called a family. For decades, I've been the primary breadwinner. And that income has been socialized through my entire family. My wife, my daughter, shared with others. It's a small environment. But what's important to understand is it's a voluntary system. If people want to get together and share their income, share their expenses, use a group to determine how things will be done, a form of government, that's fine, as long as it's voluntary. The problem is what most people are referring to as socialism, what Bernie Sanders refers to as democratic socialism, what Ocasio-Cortez refers to as socialism, is not a voluntary system. It's not a question of, hey, your system works so great, let me join. It's a question of, hey, my system works so great, you're going to join or we're going to punish you. That is not compatible with the Constitution because it's not compatible with liberty. I've talked about liberty before, but let me give you a brief overview. Liberty has multiple levels. Liberty in general is the freedom to do whatever you want without outside influence, general liberty. To then you have natural liberty, which is the freedom to do whatever you want, restrained only by natural law. The laws that are so obvious, you don't even need to write them down. Like, don't murder, don't steal, don't cheat. That's natural liberty. Now, civil liberty is the natural liberty restrained only as much as is necessary for a civilization to function, to be safe. Things like traffic laws that say in America we drive on the right-hand side of the road, and we're going to post speed limits. And yes, you have to stop at stop signs. There are a lot of other laws that we have, and they aren't really necessary, except if we want to live together as a civil society, we need those. Now, once you create laws beyond necessary for a civil society, for the health of a civil society, now you're into arbitrary laws, and those are called tyranny. So this is a big, quick jump from, I have natural law, I have civil laws, to tyranny. In other words, there's a big jump from, yes, you have to drive on the right-hand side of the road because that way we don't go running into each other all the time, to, no, this is what has to be in a car, and this is how much mileage the car has to get, and yes, it has to have airbags, and yada, yada, yada. And all those things may be good, but as soon as they're not voluntary, as soon as there's a law that is established not for the safety of society as a whole, now it's an arbitrary law, and that is tyranny. So when we're talking about socialism and a lot of the social programs, whether we're talking about Medicare for all, free college tuition, take your pick. The problem is they are not voluntary. They are done at the point of a gun. Government is force. If government's going to force you to do it, they're going to threaten you either with fines, jail time, or gunfire. That is not compatible with liberty. Therefore, that's not compatible with the Constitution. And this is the question I love to ask people, say, well, we should have, some socialist environment. If it's such a great system, why do you have to force people to join it? I mean, that's really what we're talking about. When people are talking about socialism, yes, everyone focuses on, I like it because I'm going to get stuff. They never think about the fact that then someone has to be forced to give you stuff. That's why I say individual socialism, well, that's quite allowable. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you cannot live that way. There is a lot of stuff in the Constitution that says you cannot be forced to live that way. And that's the difference. Force. So when people come and say, I'm going to give you stuff, start thinking about, well, who are you going to force to give up stuff to give to me? When they say we're going to give you free healthcare, who are they going to force to provide that healthcare? Or who are they going to force to pay for that healthcare? When they say they're going to give you free college, who's going to be forced to pay for it? Or who's going to be forced to teach you? Notice how we've gone from liberty to force. By the way, before you think that socialism in America is something new, understand we have social security. You are forced to put away a certain amount of money for retirement because that money isn't actually set aside for your retirement, but that's a whole nother kettle of fish. You're forced to pay for medical coverage for the elderly. You're forced to pay for medical cover for the poor. You're forced to pay taxes to do a lot of things. That is social engineering. That is socialism on that spectrum from I've got liberty to I've got communism. We are already well down the road towards a socialist America. The question is, when are we going to hit the brakes and stop? So let me sum up. Individual socialism, the private voluntary choice to live a socialist lifestyle, is absolutely, positively allowed by the Constitution. Enforced socialism, or socialism really at the government level, is not. Because it is a violation of your natural rights. It's a violation of your right to live your life the way you want, to do with your property what you want, to be secure in your persons and papers and effects because someone has to come and take it to use for someone else. It is a violation of the basic human right, and it is always sold like snake oil salesmen as, look at what you're going to get. And nobody ever asked, yeah, but what's it actually going to cost? Because while you may be happy to get free college, what happens when you're paying for someone else's college? While you may be happy to get free health care, what happens when you're the one that's required to pay for someone else's health care? And if you really think government is that good at doing things, why does the Constitution put so many restraints on the governments, especially the federal government? Put another way, if socialism is such a great system, why are people forced to participate? If it's so good, shouldn't people volunteer? And not just the people that are getting the goodies, but the people that are giving the goodies? So this is a quick ponder this episode, and I hope you found it interesting. I hope maybe I answered a couple questions. I hope maybe I made a couple people think in ways they may not have thought about things. If you want more, head over to the Constitution Study. As I said, this came out of questions I've been asked. So ask questions on the website. More than happy to try and answer them. Most of all, I'm hoping you'll take these messages and you'll share them. The idea is not to be mean and saber rattling, but let's educate each other. Let's learn from each other. Let's share what we have learned so that people understand maybe a bit deeper what is at risk when we talk about something being unconstitutional, or when we talk about a violation of rights, when we talk about taking away people's liberty. Most of all, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you again the next time on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from